Thank you, Alfonso. Thanks, everybody. It's a great honor to be here. I really appreciate it for this opportunity. I think this is a unique event that we have the possibility to share our thoughts. But and also it's a great honor to be with such colleagues, these great leaders, very successful. So in order to not repeat the same questions and the topics that we have discussed in the first panel, but I took some notes about somebody mentioned about lack of execution or communication subjects, things like, for example, flexibility, innovation. So I took some, we are going to point out some of those elements, and let's have a chat on that subject, okay? For example, communication subject. I remember at the beginning of my career, I attended a training about communication. How do we have to communicate into Anglo-Saxon world? Because this is true. There are cultural differences in the way we communicate. For example, we like to talk. But there is a reason why we like to talk. Because we like to observe the body languages. Trust is based on the ability to perceive things. And we like to talk, and sometimes we come up at the end with a headline to the point. Anglo-Saxon world, they do the opposite. They like the headline up front, and they judge the headline. Depending on their headline, they will pay more or less interest. So the risk for a Spanish executive into Anglo-Saxon audience is not to start with a headline, because you may lose the audience. So I experienced. So this is the first question, and by the way, this is very connected to the ability to influence, communication, influential skills, and other subjects that we will connect to some of the points that we have raised before. So I like to ask Sonia, who has been 20 years abroad, as you said before, great experience in JP Morgan, in the banking sector, London, U.S. What do you think about that? Communication, how do you feel about that?
Can everybody listen? Yeah. All right. Yeah, it's actually talking about complexity as well, because there is internal communication, which is to the Anglo-Saxon peers, co-workers, and management, and then there is the external communication, which is to Latin American clients. So it's a very different approach both ways. And I think internally, I agree with you, and I think we definitely need to sell ourselves and what we do in our vision in a more, not process-driven way, but more maybe, and yes, we are very blunt, very direct. I don't think that's a negative at all. That's always positive, anyway. And in external communication with Latin America, I think we cross the bridge of the cultural affinity very fast, particularly me being a Spaniard obviously helps, because many of the clients have descendants from Galicia, Asturias, somewhere in Spain, so we talk about bullfights, food and soccer, and so it's an easy bridge to cross. But then also we need to be very respectful when we talk about business of how we do it, how we manage that relationship over time. Because these clients have built impressive business in very hostile environments for decades. So I learn a lot from them actually. So I think that humble and respectful approach to Latin Americans is also a very important factor to manage. So it's a very complex two-way internal and external.
Thank you. I think Sonia also has mentioned about the communication and thinking process, because one thing is what we think, another thing is how we express that we think, and how the people will perceive it. And that depends culture by culture. Let me introduce Aris. Great experience, Clear Channel, international. So an expert actually. You were in Walt Disney. You have a lot of knowledge in terms of music and entertainment, and also communication. So what do you think about it?
Well, I share everything that you said. I think one of the things that I had to learn working for American companies was basically give the headline, and then elaborate if you're asked to elaborate. Because if not, and it is true, Spaniards have the tendency to explain the reasons and then come to the conclusion, and we bore the audience. So I had to change that, and also when you apply to your work in Latin America, it's also very important to adapt to your audience. You always have to keep simple messages as everywhere else, But in Latin America, probably when you do business, you have to elaborate more the way you approach any issue, because if you go straight to your point, you're screwed, you'll never succeed. So you really have to introduce yourself, let the other partner to introduce himself or herself, and after X minutes or X hours, go to the point. So it's a very sophisticated, but at the same time simple way to understand how you have to communicate in one place and another place. So when I talk to my management team, my bosses, I'm very direct. When I'm in Latin America, I elaborate more, I respect more times, I listen more to come to the conclusion.
Perfect. So the other subject that we mentioned about execution, right? Execution is I would say a broad word, and it depends on the area that you intend to execute and the complexity of the project that you intend to lead. So, but there is one subject around execution, especially in a multinational, is the ability to have orchestrating skills. You have a specific objective, and no matter how complex that objective is, you will have to take advantage from the multinational resources. So, communication, relationship, trust is important, but as well as long as you orchestrate your skills, orchestrate your ability to influence to some of the people to help you to execute properly. So execution is not only process orientation. I mean, understand, Anglo-Saxon world, they have a large, excellent execution processes and machine, that's correct. But when you touch innovation, it's something different. So innovation versus execution, I heard that people like to talk and to plan to, let's say, to define great ideas, but when you translate those ideas into execution, this is what there is a challenge in there, right? So again, coming back to the point about orchestrating skills, what's your feeling in terms, you intend to set up an iconic project and to make it scalable and to be successful? And what do you think about the ability to orchestrating skills from the Spanish executives? What should we do in front of the big multinational? I like to address to Enrique. Enrique is a worldwide leader for Hewlett-Packard, so he has been many years Hewlett-Packard, so he has been in Spain, he moved to the US, so he has a broad experience on that subject.
So let me tell you what are the differences I see between a Spanish executive and an American executive. And the previous panel mentioned it a little bit before. A Spanish executive will look at the problem and will say, yes, we can do that, we'll find very creative ways of addressing the problem, getting the result. But many times we'll not spend time building the process, so the next time the same problem happens, which is very frequent in corporations, the company is ready to manage in a simple way. So I think it's an area where the creativity we were talking before helps to get things done, but at the same time becomes a problem when the company faces the need to address the same issue in the future, because really everything needs to be rebuilt again. And I think this balance between creativity and process building is something that in general in Spain, and people coming from Spain, we have very different from the balance that the teams and the people will have here.
That's a great point. So flexibility and adaptability to execute is also crucial. Sometimes some American companies, they build great products for US markets. When they try to move those products and services outside, some of those they have to be more flexible and customized to be competitive. So I like to ask Antonio from Monday, great counsel, with a lot of experience. From legal point of view, it's not the same to sell to China and to sell to US, to sell to Latin America, even it's not the same to be competitive into the emerging markets rather than inside US. So what do you think about? And execution is connected to those points.
I had experience both working in the corporate world here in New York in a large multinational as part of Philip Morris companies and Kraft Foods, as I have had the experience of working in Latin America. And I can tell you things are totally different. I mean, we're talking communication, we're talking process, we're talking leadership and stuff. It's extremely different. 15 years ago when I moved over to the US, working here, being the first lawyer expat in the US, I learned that I had to be quiet, listen, and work sideways. Lawyers are people with big egos. They have the even bigger in American corporate world, and so do senior managers. And my life is around all those. So I learned that I had to be quiet, I had to learn, I had to talk to the people, on the side, rather than confronting people directly in meetings, even if I thought strongly on a point, or if I thought I was right. In Latin America, it's my experience, 13 years already, it's very different. You have to persuade people and you have to lead people, because otherwise nothing happens. You still have to avoid hurting the egos, but you need to provide the structure. And in my opinion, you have to do it in a subtle way so that it's not felt. And you have to work with the whole team, not just with the boss.
Manel, you wanted to say something?
Something they told me about your microphone, but
Mine is not working, my microphone?
okay.
Okay.
Yes, about
Please.
yeah.
So it's not. It's off.
Closer, maybe.
Okay. And the thing that I learned probably as a lawyer, this is very important, where you have to lead people, because otherwise nothing happens. You still have to avoid hurting the egos, but you need to provide the structure. And in my opinion, you have to do it in a subtle way so that it's not felt. And you have to work with the whole team, not just with the boss.
Manel, you wanted to say something?
Something they told me about your microphone, but
Mine is not working, my microphone?
okay. But
Okay.
yes, about
Please.
yeah.
So it's not. It's off. Oh.
Closer, maybe.
Okay. And the thing that I learned probably as a lawyer, this is very important, where we are very often, particularly lawyers in multinationals, predictable, and you're expected to be predictable as a corporate lawyer in the U.S. The best advantage for your client, for your company, is to be unpredictable. And that you can do externally, you can do so much internally. And I think that's my experience, and that's something that I try to teach everybody. You have to be unpredictable, because then you're not adding value to anything. You're just following a process that somebody set up, and you have to go, different paths, different ways to get to the competitive advantage. So.
Well, just maybe just maybe adding something what has been said. I would say that especially for Latin America, but I would say for all the emerging countries, the Spanish profile is great. It works. We show success in our companies in Latin America, how we manage that. And when you think why, it's because, in my opinion, we are great establishing relationships with people. We are creating these bindings to the people because it's part of our cultures. When you approach the Latin American market, you realize that if you don't generate these bindings, if you don't generate this personal contact, then it's very hard to close the deal, very hard to go forward. It's not the same in different cultures. I've been working in Germany and so on, so it's not the same. Then applies more, I would say, the logics and the rational. So when they proposed me even to handle Latin America, to manage Latin America, I thought, why myself? I think that Spaniards, we are the most Latin in Europe, but the most European in Latin America. And this is a good combination in my point of view. We bring this confidence to European or American companies that we've got this European, I would say, standard profile, combined with this Spaniard or Latin mood of making business that is absolutely necessary, especially in emerging countries. So I would say, if you decide to run your business in Latam or emerging markets, put one Spaniard on the board.
Let me tell a joke about this. I was watching a soccer match with my wife. One of our sons was playing, and one of the mothers of the team came to talk to us, and she asked us, "Oh, where are you coming from?" And we said, "Oh, we're from Spain." So she looked at us and said, "You look European."
So Again, going back to the execution, let me bring the subject and the difference between invention and innovation. For example, Thomas Edison didn't invent the lamp, the electrical lamp, but he set up General Electric. That changed the world. That's innovation, right? So I think Spanish executives, we have to work into the multinationals to move invention to innovation. And the reason why is because when in most of the countries, for example, I have been in Europe, including Turkey, Israel, France, Italy, I saw big difference from the universities inventing many things that few of them really become innovation. US is different. They are more focused in innovation rather than invention, right? So to be influential into multinational is when we help to develop new products or services or new business model, it's important to have the innovative focus rather than inventive focus. So two different things, right? What do you think about that? Enrique.
Sure, I think it's related to the comment I was making before. I think you can be very creative, but if you don't find and you don't build a process to stabilize this creation, to be able to repeat it, and to create a product or a service around that, the inventiveness is useless for the company. And therefore, there is no value created, so at the end, it goes nowhere. So I think this balance of inventing and innovating, or creating and building processes, is really critical to succeed in any company, and particularly in American companies or in technology companies like mine, that we live from inventing things in areas where people even didn't realize this is something they wanted. So I think this balance is fundamental, and I don't think this is something that in the Spanish culture we are really very used to, because we have as an honor to think of, we don't respect rules, we can make up things, we can go here and change, and if you operate that way, at the end you are not enabling the creation of standard processes and being able to repeat in an efficient way.
But I think that works, even in my job, which is very traditional, and corporate lawyers are expected to be very serious, very process-oriented, very conservative. I've been 22 years with my company, with 13 years in my position, and one of the keys that I found to be successful and continue to add value to my business is challenging things, changing things all the time. I remember when I took over the Latin America region at first, there was this big thing about litigation in Brazil. So many hundreds of labor litigation cases, tax litigation. I mean, everybody that does business in Brazil had these things. Well, particularly on labor litigation, the practice there was to settle. You're never going to win. So you have to settle. So I challenged that. And right now, I have a statistical information proving that not settling is the best deal for litigating in Brazil in the labor market. And so this is a simple example that even in something like the legal processes and the legal issues that affect companies, you can innovate and you can add a lot of value to your businesses.
And to your comment on challenging, I think in my company at JP Morgan, what has been amazing is the career mobility changes that have been given me as opportunities has bring in every change, because I change line of businesses and functions and roles. So I think in the new opportunity I was managing to bring into the innovation process, or changing things, challenging how they were doing things, all that change and experience from other line of businesses, which has made my challenge a lot more, I think, easier to challenge all the things that were doing before me. So I think.
Yeah, I'm going to turn up my experience with one example, because I really do think that those who operate in Latin America or have a regional Latin American role have an easy job, so to say. In the following meaning, my business, which is outdoor advertising, is evolving very, very fast. 25 years ago, outdoor advertising was billboards. Suddenly, someone invented the bus shelters. They put advertising on the bus shelters. Then, people invented a scrolling system where in the same shelter you have different phases, so you could sell 3 times to 3 different clients the same shelter, and you could triple the economics of the revenue of that shelter. And then we started talking and developing digital screens. So now in Europe it's all about digital screens. I'll tell you how I have innovated in Latin America with respect to this, and how Latin America in my company has become the fastest growing region in the world. Latin America is a billboard business. It's a pure billboard business. Traditional paper, ugly, and polluted. So what I decided to do to innovate was to just bring digital into Latin America. So we pioneered digital in Brazil, in Peru, in countries like Chile, Mexico, and suddenly we became the stars of the market. Why? Because we have saved those markets 20 years. Not because they were going to go through all the steps, but we just were faster and smarter, probably. So innovate means copying with pride in many occasions, and that's what we do. And that's a fast way to grow. So part of the success of the people who are here is the attitude that we all have, which I agree with you is not the standard in Spaniards, probably because of the huge problem we have in education. But we bring the know-how. We bring a know-how. I've been in the company for it was 8 years when I started running Latin America. I brought 8 years of know-how. So I have ideas, I have done things, I have seen things that have not happened yet in Latin America. And by bringing those ideas, I'm helping them be faster and growing faster.
That's great. One subject about to be successful into a multinational, it's not only to communicate very well, to orchestrate the skills, to execute, to deliver results, because many other people will do the same. It's actually to find out or to create an iconic project. But iconic project not just in the area you are living, an iconic project to be replicable all around the world within your company. So it's not easy, because execution is a key component, innovation is a key component, your ability to influence other elements into the company that support that project to become iconic. So it's a kind of a chess play that you need to play all across. Let me share with you one example, which is connected to emerging markets, not only Latin America, but also emerging markets. Emerging markets are great opportunity, but also they have challenges, macroeconomic challenges, they have political challenges, and medium long term is important. Short term sometimes is a bit challenging until you settle, right? So I personally learned when in Latin America and in Turkey and other emerging countries I was engaged in a few years, is that when you get an iconic project, you need to make sure that it's replicable and you have a medium long-term approach. For example, the smart city concept, Internet of Everything in the high-tech industry is right now a clear trend all across, right? So smart city is a transformational city that have transportation, energy, everything. So we have worked for years. 6 years ago, we started with the Barcelona city as a smart city. And we set up procedures, we worked with the city hall, with other partners, we created together an ecosystem, whatever. It was just a city, all the great branding city, soccer, many things. But at that point, not yet about technology or innovation in some specific areas. But after the years, let me tell you one thing, that orchestrating the skills to the entire company and to deliver specific results, I was very proud to see how the chairman of the company represents Cisco presented Barcelona, an iconic project to the company for a smart city. And even more, I was very proud to see that the mayor of Barcelona was awarded a week ago by one of the 50 persons most influential in the world. In that list is the Pope, is Bill Clinton, is Merkel, and other people. And the reason why was the smart city concept that the city was bringing. So it took years, but there are ways, and my colleagues, they have other examples with them, in terms that being Spanish or having other nationalities, when we pay extremely attention, we adapt, we understand, we develop what we call intelligent, emotional intelligence, social intelligence, and empathetic intelligence to understand how you have to maneuver to get the objective that you have in mind. Obviously, execution is important, but also the ability that to execute those models that they are replicable all across. Any comments, or we move to questions? Questions?
My question is about how you manage all these, like in these international companies, people, not only for Latin American market, but you will have Asians, African American, that have like all different skills. How these international people, that is happening to me now, like how you, I see like Spanish a little like orchestra director, knowing how to excel on those skills of other people. How do you manage your team? Or sometimes even if it's Latin America, but you will have other people from all over. So I would like to.
Sonia, maybe?
Yeah, sure. I'm gonna start. Definitely focusing on Latin American, or covering Latin American clients, I might say I have more of Spanish, Portuguese speakers than Middle Easterns. But I worked a lot in London for 6 years, and I worked with Middle Easterns, with Northern Europeans, with Germans. So I think we come from such a cultural diverse background in Europe, and I think at least I think of it of a generation that we got integrated to the European community. And then we, some of my friends moved to Frankfurt, some of us to London. So actually, I think we have already brought up all that expertise of managing many different ethnicities in the group, but also diversity in functions and roles. So how to build a team with the right skill sets, I think is also critical of managing the talent and the teams, and women and men. And so it's more things than just nationalities. But I think we bring that experience already working in Europe.
Building on what Sonia is saying, I think the key principles don't change. The principles of investing significant time defining what the objectives are, explaining how people is going to be measured, clarifying what are the values that you're expecting the team to perform. I think there are a few critical things that don't change. What you really need to adapt is how you communicate, how you connect with the people. Because you cannot talk to a Chinese in the same way you will talk to a Brazilian, and in the same way you will talk to a German. You need to communicate that in a different way, but at the end the essence of this is what we need to achieve. These are going to be the elements you have to make it happen. And this is how I expect you to do it. Don't change. How you communicate it, you need to understand the culture and make sure the person understands what you want. Because if not, they will never get it done.
And I like very much the concept of servant leadership. Like somebody said earlier, I mean, we are what we are, and we are in these positions more or less successful because of the kind of people that have worked or work with us. So I take very, very seriously, we have programs for internships in Brazil, in Mexico, and Argentina, where we have law students starting to work in our company while they are still at university, and I take care of interviewing all of them, knowing them. They all have opportunities to present to me. They interact with me. So that's one, and at every single level, you have to know the people, their expectations. I always tell everyone, I don't expect you to be normal, right? Have normal aspirations, have normal values, all that, and be hardworking, and be smart, and then provide. If you set that tone, and if you've been so fortunate to be as long as I've been in this position, to have, communicated all these values and lived all those values, then all of a sudden you see that it's permeating, and people start behaving that way. And as a legal department within a large corporation, we have our microclimate that is very much recognized as such, and everybody is, we're dealing with everybody, different groups. You have to set it out, and then it works naturally.
Yeah, let me say that I think you touched the key thing, which is people, and I think we haven't talked enough about people. People is probably the one thing that makes us successful. The way we select people, or our teams, or the way we treat people, or we help develop people, which to me is a responsibility, not just an obligation. it's I think, a responsibility as managers to make sure that we offer opportunities to the people that work with us, whether it's a young person or a mature professional. What I would say, in my experience and the way I do it with people, is it doesn't matter to me the age, it doesn't matter the culture, where they come from. I tell you, I work with people who are extremely different. And a Brazilian is completely different than a Chilean, for example. But you can't imagine how different they are. Now, everyone that works for me has had two things. One is ambition, and the second thing is attitude. With ambition to go far, and with the attitude to make it happen, you'll succeed. So the common thing in all my team members are those elements, which are my drivers. Someone may have other formulas, other ingredients, but mine are those, and they've worked.
Very cool. I think earning trust is the basic point. People will follow as long as they trust. The second point is the leadership should have a balance. Leadership style should be a balance between inspirational, supportive, and also challenging, just to move to the next level. So, two observations here is something I learned. I'm still learning, by the way, because in an inclusive and diverse environment, cultural differences is so important. The balance point is dynamic. But for example, two observations is don't make judgment based upon your background, especially if they perceive that you break the trust, because they will think that you are an unfair leader. Okay, try to develop an empathetic process. Put yourself into their shoes. And the second point here is don't use micro-inequities in your communication language. Actually, trying to translate the micro-inequities into the micro-advantages. Micro-inequities is just a gesture, for example. That because the innovation and creativity comes from the differences, and people feel good to express what they think. If you limit that because you make judgments up front, people will not share with you because they will feel measured.
Just to finish with this question, I think that today's complexity is to put different people together in this melting pot. I would say that it's easy to say that it's good that you share values and you share the vision of the company, but I think that the real success is when you make people, you bind people to this project. You enable people again. And just to close up and talk about the Spanish ones, I think that one of our good values is that we are good in binding these people, in making these people feel part of this project, in getting all the people together to the project. I think it's good to create this team spirit, not only allowing them to go independently. I think this is the key success also of a leader, to put, as you said, an orchestra director, to make everybody sound at the right moment, at the right time, collaborating with the rest. So this is the major challenge.
It's great. More questions?
I have a question. My name is Carlos Navarro, I work for United Nations. I'm doing the renovation of the buildings now. And the first thing that you learn when you join United Nations is they actually, it's a special course for everybody coming from 216 countries. And you have a sort of bell like that. So the Spaniards are here with the Germans. The Latin Americans are together with the Japanese in terms of communication, meaning that you have to adjust your speech when you speak to a Latin American person. So I noticed, because I worked as well in Portugal for some time, and my mom is from Mexico, that the way that sometimes we go to Latin America is like, oh, this is like the backyard, it's easy, we share the same culture. And then I've been, across different situations where I remember one meeting in Lisboa with a colleague of mine, and she was pretending to speak in Portuguese, and she was saying that she slept with the person that was at the table, because the word acordar in Portuguese means something different from the Spanish. So I just wanted to ask you, if we were talking about communication, if this is something that you have actually come across, and what is like the challenge there and the solutions to that?
I think you need to consider the idiosyncrasy of each country, which someone mentioned the Brazilians have nothing to do with Chileans, and Argentina has nothing with Mexicans. So definitely there is that, like it happens in Europe, right? I mean, Germans and French and Spanish are very different, so I don't think it's that different. The difference in Europe, they have different languages. In Latin America, we have only 2. And yeah, I covered Brazil 3 years, and I spoke horrible Portuguese. And still, the Brazilians were extremely appreciative that I was trying, you know? So I think it all depends of the attitude. We have been talking about attitudes and values throughout this afternoon, and I don't think it's such a challenge. It shouldn't be, to the contrary. But you need to be cognizant of these idiosyncratic differences across each country.
Thank you.
May I answer? Because I personally think this is the never-ending project to learn about how to communicate across, even in Latin America. Sometimes I tell you one thing. I have been, when I was managed at the same meeting, French, Spanish, Italians, Cypriots, Turkish, Israeli, Greeks, and a bunch of people about they can be more flexible about the communication mistakes because all of us, we talk in a different language, which is English, right? And for us, and somehow we can be even a little more flexible. So, but that requires an effort to make sure there is a communication. But in Latin America, despite we have the same language, I told you one thing, sometimes people's perception is different when you try to communicate. Country by country, Chile, Argentina, Peru, I'm learning so much running in the last 2 years that geography because of that reason. So inclusion and diversity, cultural differences is a never-ending project, which for a leader is so important because you don't take that into account, you make a lot of micro-inequities. Even you don't notice it, but the people they notice. And that could break what I call the trusting communication flow, right?
I think you need to check with the locals. That's what I do. You know, I ask for advice how to deal with a specific situation with certain people, or I discuss the impressions from a meeting. And I've been treated, very nicely and got nowhere. And I've been treated very, very badly and got a lot of success. And, I'm talking about the Ministry of Labor in Argentina shouted at me like you can't imagine, Carlos Tomada, and then we resolved a big issue that we had there. The head of the tax authority, Aristoteles Núñez in Mexico, treated me very, very nicely, gave me so many meetings, we had coffee, nothing happened. And I got the wrong impressions most of the time getting out of those meetings.
More questions? I think you wanted to.
Good evening, and thank you very much for being with us today, sharing your experience. I have a question not only for you, but also for the previous panelists. Which piece of advice would you give to young people like me and many of us here today that admire what you have achieved and would like to achieve something similar in the future? So, we are trying to work on it, but of course, all your experience and advice.
Maybe Joaquin, we should pass to you. Who's Joaquin? Okay. Maybe some of the volunteers from the previous panel.
Do you want? I'm not Joaquin, but I truly believe the single most important thing is you need to believe that you can do it. The moment you get confidence in yourself, you can do it. There's a very nice sentence from Little Mermaid. You know that? That says, you can wait forever for a miracle to happen, or you can go outside and make it happen. So if you go outside and make it happen, it will happen.
And I think 2 words that the panel has discussed, both panels, is curiosity and taking risks. In career mobility opportunities, in changing countries, in learning about new markets, new businesses. I think that's huge.
And maybe the last thing is do something you really enjoy. Yeah. Because if you like it, things will go well. If you don't, things will not go well. And especially as you grow in your career, what you need to like is the problems that you will have to face. It's not so much the normal activity, it's those things that will keep you awake at night. If you like to think about them and you like to resolve them, things will go well. If not, you will be very miserable.
I would say, if you stay in your area of comfort, you'll never grow. You have to constantly leave your area of comfort if you really want to mature and grow. Go for it.
Exactly. So I understand that you already made the move, so you come abroad from Spain?
Yeah, I'm from Spain. I was living in China before,
Yeah.
and before that in Germany.
Wow.
So I like moving.
Then
Congratulations.
you are on the way. You're on the way for success. I have to tell you my personal experience. I've got some nephews in Spain, and I used to go back once a year, twice a year. And when I visit them, I said, they have just finished the studies. I said, honestly, with 26% unemployment, what are you doing in Spain? Why don't you go abroad? Every time I go, they're still there. So I think that you already are on the way for success.
So this advice probably is not for you because you know more than us probably. But my advice to the youth is don't be afraid about failure, as long as you learn from the failures. I always remember in Stanford, he invited a guest, the professor invited a guest, a very strange guy, the guy. They came out and said, hey guys, you know what? I'm a millionaire. You know. And you know what? I'm a millionaire. Not because I'm more intelligent than you, because I failed 7 times to set up the startup, but I was successful in the 8th one, and I'm a millionaire, right? And I learned from my mistakes. So I think Spanish youth population, Latin America youth population, they have to increase the entrepreneurial spirit without being afraid about failing. That's innovation, comes from that. Yeah?
Yeah.
More questions?
Yeah, one more. I'm a director in the Latin American tax group, so I work also a lot with Latin America. And Sonia, as you were saying that you learn how diverse is Latin America. I definitely went down that path. I learned how diverse. Do you have, and then through that diversity, I have found that there are some countries that I think that I personally connect better with. I don't know if all of you, except Enrique, you work with Latin America, do you have some nationalities in Latin America that you think that as a Spaniard you connect better? And I will do also the other question, but that's politically incorrect, whether there is any country that you do not connect with.
No, I think actually Latin America is funny because when a Mexican says yes, you know you're going to have quite a few more meetings until it gets done. In Colombia, the same. So I think, whereas a Venezuelan, for example, says yes and goes along with it. So I think when you finally experience and develop those relationships in those particular countries, I think you start learning about in business, particularly what it means, you know, a good business meeting, a bad business meeting. So I think you start to get into that. So that definitely is a learning process. I don't think there's a book that tells you that.
This is connected to my previous comments in terms that a leader should walk away from making judge or to differentiate in those cultures that you feel connect more or less. Actually should erase the connection word from it, because otherwise all cultures are different. They have their particularities, they have the ways of thinking, they have the ways of communicating. So a global leader has to develop the ability to adapt his leadership style and to be influenced in those cultures. By the way, there's a challenge. It's very easy to say, right? Because all of us, we have a background, and we are somehow tied to that background. But that's therefore. The worst thing, yeah.
Sorry, I was going to say that there's many cultures within any of the big countries. I mean, Nicaragua, El Salvador, they're too small to have all that. But Brazil, Argentina, Mexico, people, Colombia. It's very different to deal with somebody from Cartagena, from Medellin, or from Bogota. You have to, at least my advice is to get advice.
And there is one thing that the people really hate. People hate unfairness. If they, I would say, qualify you as an unfair leader, that's really hard to take it out, right? And for that reason, it's so important, you know, that they show you as like a neutral. I mean, they hate that, to feel that the leaders have inner circles. So you have an inner circle, I don't feel part of that inner circle, you are unfair. That will not follow, that will not contribute. Communication is cut in that process. And cultural differences are crucial to be understood in order to manage that stigma in terms that to be qualified by my inner circle. Right? By the way, it's very easy to say, difficult to implement.
Jordi, you made a very elegant and subtle reference to your role as I don't have to scroll. Thank you. It's working. Can you hear? Is it on now? Awesome. Okay, here. No, I was saying that you Jordi made a. Can you hear me? Okay, maybe it just works over there. I'll just speak up. You made a very elegant reference to your role or your contribution in terms of Cisco systems, designing Barcelona as the pioneer smart city in the world. And I think that you're sort of humble. I don't think most people realize that. So yours is an example of how a Spanish executive has influenced, based on credibility and responsibilities and so on, how it has influenced the decision of a multinational such as Cisco Systems. So, is it any ideas in that anyone want to elaborate any other ways of Spanish executive could benefit Spain in times of a depressed economy?
You allow me, all of us, all the two panels, all of us, I think the executive have demonstrated to be relevant into your organizations, right? Now, probably they have found also iconic projects, but the reason why I brought this subject is iconic project, iconic or transformational project that become iconic depends also in the executive ability to scale it up into the organization and to define a replicable model which will be very beneficial for the multinational. That's a part of the execution process, right? And everything we have discussed here, communication, leadership style, specific orchestrating skills to manage things are connected. Because at the end, everything is based on people. No matter how big is the multinational, it's about people.
But I think what you're asking also is, how can we help being in a multinational company? How can we help Spain or the economy in Spain? I think there are several things we can do. One is influence our companies to try to invest in Spain and explain them why Spain is not as bad as it looks in many cases. Because when they see some of the numbers, 26% unemployment, oh, there must be about to be a revolution in Spain. I think something we can do is really explain that there are many good things in Spain and that really companies can be successful. I think we can also influence and help the Spanish administration or other Spanish companies to understand how to do business with American companies and how to get American companies closer to Spain. And I think we can play this role of trying to connect and to build bridges between the two sides of the world. But then there will be an economic reason, as you were saying before. But there are many other barriers that we can help to remove.
From my side, actually, we do have a very strong local team in Spain. And actually, now that I see a lot of interest in Latin America to invest in Spain, I'm leveraging a lot the resources I have in the JP Morgan Madrid office, which is a phenomenal team and really long-rooted in the country. So I think the interest is there of investors willing to look for opportunities in Spain. And I think we just need to connect that network faster.
And maybe one more thing, something else we can do, which I think many of us are doing, is bring people from Spain to work with us.
Correct.
Because something that we really can do is offer good jobs and opportunities to other people to really experience and have an American experience. It is something that I think all of us are doing, and I think it's also very important.
Well, from our side, we managed to have the headquarters of Europe in Barcelona for Swarovski. I have to say that it was not that difficult because there was a long list of people who would love to come to work in Barcelona. So we had a good bunch of talent to choose on. So actually we did that.
To me, it's a hard question because I think it's nice to bring Spaniards to abroad, But on the other side, we may be perceived as too local, as a new Christopher Columbus invading, our markets. And I struggle with that. I really struggle with that, my company. Although the language barrier in Latin America helps the Spaniards because they speak the language, and the others don't. I think what we're doing here, and like today, is relevant. And probably the reason why I'm here is because I'm selling Spain. I'm not selling Latin America, I'm not selling Clear Channel, I'm not selling myself, I'm selling Spain. And I think in Spain there's talent, there's lots of talent, and that talent is available. So it's a good market to deep dive into to get talent.
I think there is a lot of innovation here. More invention than innovation, but we are on the way to translate that invention to innovation here in Spain. The only thing I can say is there are elements that are against us in terms, for example, Spain is a small market in comparison to Brazil, in comparison to US, in comparison to Russia, in comparison to some specific markets. Right now, it's not really a growing market. Obviously, it's that they're a little bit challenging. However, we can get iconic projects from Spain. Barcelona is one of those examples because they will have a lot of leadership. But when I mean iconic, I mean a clear showcase that could be replicable, could scale up, and it shows innovation from a business model point of view, even more from business model point of view rather than for technology, product, or services point of view. And I think there are a lot of opportunities in Spain, and I think all of us, we also try to influence our multinationals to maximize the interest into Spain. But the best way to do it is to get an iconic project, to elevate it at the top, and in that case to become more influential all across the world. And that's possible, that's really possible.
I think people have to be really competitive and have to be movable. Because, in my company, there's a lot of talented people from Spain that are not movable. They prefer to stay where they are, limit their careers. And there's other people that have made the move and were not successful. So, I don't know the numbers, but I've seen some that were not successful.
This is very interesting what I hear coming from everybody in the audience. But I kind of have an analogy. If you have a team, a sports team, and you deplete all the star players out of it, the team becomes weak. So I see a lot of resources being pulled out of Spain into the U.S. But if we don't contribute back to become the Japan of the 70s in Spain, perhaps taking an initiative to modernize the labor laws to make it more competitive. At the same time, being able to hire more people. You build a team by bringing in strong resources. I see a lot of pulling out, moving out, but I think it's time to have an equilibrium and bring back to Spain. So, as corporate executives, what are your biggest challenges to make something like that happen?
This is the last question. One of you please answer. Because let's keep the Anglo punctuality that we started talking about Latin America and you just lost it. So please.
Anyone too?
Build a team.
I think, for example, what we're doing in our case is Spain for us is one of the largest development centers outside the US. So what we have is, as we bring people here, then we send them back. And then when they go back, they really can share and can grow the local teams. And I think if you look at HP and we compare it with other executives, other companies, because of our very large presence in Spain, the number of executives in Spain, of Spanish executives in the US in HP, I think is the largest of any technology company. And it's because the activities we do in Spain go well beyond the commercial activities that many other multinationals do. Now, if we were in Italy, that example would not work.
In our case, around the smart city, we are developing a big center of innovation with the entire ecosystem. The intention is, because the intention is to replicate it across the world, that ecosystem, most of the Spanish companies, will export that knowledge and those services outside by increasing the size and the capabilities of those companies. That's job creation, and also you expand the multinational capabilities through an ecosystem that is start from being very small.
Yeah, we within Clear Channel, when I was the general manager of Spain, I created a project, I launched a project which has become really iconic, not just for my company, but also for Barcelona, which is a bike system called eThing. So I developed it, it was very successful, it became like the booming of the public bike services worldwide. And I convinced the organization, the US organization, to move all the intelligence, all the IT, and all the know-how from San Antonio into Barcelona. So those things you do in a very smart way, in a very gentle way, but of course you do that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I was going to say a few words, but we've gone over the time, and I'm going to ask for a big round of applause to. Thank all the committee members that were involved, the chamber, Xavi, Gemma, and especially press for housekeepers for letting us use the facilities. Thank you, and we hope to see you very soon again.